Hello, everybody. My name's Alice Hugh, and here I am in Shanghai. I'm an artist, a performer, and I'm quite active in the deaf arts community. I volunteer in the media department at WFD, and I'd like to thank you all for having us along to present this wonderful, exciting program to you. I do hope you enjoy today's events. First of all, a warm welcome, and we're looking at deaf culture, the arts, and human rights. WFD, for the first time, has coordinated a global approach to this, and we've had various submissions from a number of deaf artists and performers throughout the world to be able to showcase the rich and diverse talents that do exist globally. And we do understand there's an intersection between deaf people demonstrating their language group through art and performance. The deaf community has their own language, as many of us know, and each national sign language exists globally. We have a rich culture, and the emergence of deaf culture has come historically through various communities that exist and have evolved over time. And we understand the importance of our rich history and how it has an impact on us today. The arts, humour, being able to express oneself is a very important part of being a deaf artist and also performing within a strong deaf community and being able to celebrate all these positive aspects. Deaf art is an important part of the deaf community globally. It's part of our identity, who we are, and we should be proud of this. We have deaf artists who are involved in performing visual vernacular, various performances, which is a wonderful tribute considering our history of oppression and the community that's thriving today. And it's really extraordinary how deaf people have a powerful influence globally in connection with human rights in being able to express ourselves. So I'd like to wish a warm welcome to all the actors, the various performers who will be performing today. And we have 4 panelists who will be sharing their own experiences on their art and their various modes of communication through expression through art. But WFD would like to thank everybody for their support, particularly our supporters, World in Sign, WIS, in order to be able to create today and ensure that it could happen through culture and the arts and its connection with human rights. So I'd like to celebrate and launch today's webinar. So we are available on Facebook Live and Instagram. And now I'd like to welcome the President of World Federation of the Deaf, Joe Murray. And he'll be talking about art and culture and how important and significant it is to deaf people around the world. Thank you, Alice. It's a pleasure. It's so wonderful that World Federation of the Deaf, for the first time, has had an international celebration globally celebrating culture and the arts. As Alice mentioned, culture and the arts is significant in terms of expressing our human rights. As deaf people, we advocate for our rights through various avenues. First of all, we look at advocacy that ensures we have access in day-to-day society, and also celebrating deaf people. We are a unique group of people who are recognised as having our own culture, language, and identity. And deaf people globally, historically, have had different experiences alongside hearing people. And it's not until recent times that the deaf community has grown globally. And we really should be thankful for our language and how it has contributed to deaf people's evolution. And respecting that each national language is different in each country. However, there is intersectionality and overlap that does exist that enables every single culture and every single deaf person to be able to express themselves throughout everyday life and society, no matter what their challenges are that they face throughout the world. It is important and key that deaf people are able to fully express themselves through their own culture and their own desires, and that is done through their sign language. WFD is very pleased to see the continuation of improvements for deaf people worldwide in terms of access and expression, and that can only happen through various supports and partnerships. So we would like to also recognise the French festival that occurs on a regular basis with the theatre that takes place there and the connection it brings, bringing the global community together. So this emergence through theatre and expression and human rights is key. And essentially, it's every person's human right to be able to express themselves, their thoughts, their feelings. And if they are deaf, it's through sign language throughout the deaf world. The UN Convention clearly states that it is our right as deaf people, through government support, to be able to fully express ourselves and have recognition of our culture and our language. And it's a powerful tool or article for us as individuals and cohorts to be able to demonstrate to local, national, international governments the importance of access for each and every one of us globally in order to fulfill and have successful lives, not only for ourselves, but our children and our grandchildren. And human rights are linked to all various aspects that we consider today. And this is why International Week of Deaf People is significant in the sense that we all come together, we share a common bond, a language, a culture, which is a rich foundation of life for each and every deaf person throughout the globe. So I'm very pleased that we have so many deaf people represented today in the arts sector globally who'll demonstrate various talents that exist. And the fact that there are talented communities that exist throughout the world in every nation. And it's important that their sign language is recognised and their expression of culture in the arts is key. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph, for your introduction. We'd just like to let you know that we had quite a number of submissions that came through, and it was a very difficult choice for us to make to decide who and which performers we could actually showcase. So we had to narrow it down, and we have 3 particular short videos that we would like to demonstrate. So first of all, we have Mindy from Sweden and Ramesh, who was born in Singapore but relocated to Scotland. And he's a performer and actor. And he's worked with Tron Theatre. And I'd also like to introduce Ivan Callahan from Australia, who will be providing performance in visual vernacular. Oh, that was wonderful. I hope you all enjoyed those various performances that we just saw. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Mindy Drupsa from Sweden to present to us next. And Mindy's from the Rijksstreeten Korea and will be speaking about her short video. Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Mindy. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I'd like to talk about my work in the Rijksstreeten Korea company, and I've been involved in that production company for the last 5 years. And we've created over 100 different types of performances with various artists. So today I'd like to talk about human rights and how that links in with the art culture, which is critically important. And with the various works that have taken place, we've created documentaries, comedy skits, and worked with a number of different artists, but generally we try and create pieces that relate to the deaf community and human rights. So one topic or idea that we came up with and we thought about focused on Romeo and Juliet. And as you would know, that's a famous Shakespearean play and love story that many people are familiar with. So it's all about a young man and young woman and their relationship and the family clashes that occur and what happens in that space. So we actually created something very similar, but of course involving deaf characters. And we had to work around different characters within that family and how they supported their elderly parents. We had deaf characters who were working in that space. Unfortunately, it was about one person who was quite elderly and isolated, who was shunned from the rest of the world and didn't have access to their sign language. And it wasn't until they came across a deaf person, it was a demonstration really of a love story, but how expression through sign language opened up that person's world, and it meant that that person was no longer isolated. So the importance there is, especially when we think about elderly deaf people in nursing homes and nursing care, how that they aren't shunned from society or isolated, and language is just as critical to those people later on in life. So initially when we looked at Romeo and Juliet, we decided to change the script. We were dealing with the English language, Swedish, and the various sign languages, and we wanted to make it more poetic, involve some visual vernacular, and really get across to our deaf audiences the impact of that story and what it actually means through sign. And that was critical in terms of the thematic relation to human rights. And I'd just like to show you a short 1-minute video of Romeo and Juliet. And hopefully we can release this video online. And if people would like to follow me on my website, they can access this video later on. Thank you. Oh, what a beautiful video. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mindy, and thank you for your part of the presentation. Next, we have 4 individuals that we would like to showcase. Mila Rutinger from Belgium, who's performing visual vernacular. And then we have Juan Martin Moran from Argentina, who's performing some magic. And then we have the China Disabled People's Performing Art Troupe, China Dance. And fourthly, we have Fernanda Mercado from Brazil doing some poetry for us. Enjoy. That was extraordinary. It was so beautiful. All of those performers were deaf, and I especially loved the Chinese troupe. All those deaf performers are deaf individuals. Wonderful work, thank you. So next I'd like to introduce Aisha Ramjugannath, all the way from South Africa. And Aisha will talk a little bit about Sokigo, her organisation, and how they're looking at developing young deaf individuals and providing those people with identities and role modelling work. So if you'd like to speak to us about that, Aisha, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Alice, and thank you, WFD, for inviting me along here today. Yes, I am here in South Africa, and I'm very happy about the situation at the moment. We have a number of opportunities occurring in South Africa for deaf performers, and we were very fortunate to be working with David de Keyser, as many of you would know from the Clark Doyer Festival in France. So we've formed a partnership internationally, and David actually spoke to me about what was happening in South Africa. And at the time, I must admit, I was very hesitant about moving forwards with this partnership. And David came to South Africa, and I must admit, since we developed this partnership, I've become a new person. It turned my life completely around. So we looked at arts and culture in South Africa and the requirement for the support that we needed. And we did have artists, but unfortunately, they were not working in collaboration. Many were working individually and weren't familiar of other deaf performers' works. So we decided to organise a large festival with many deaf children, with over 400 people in attendance, and had 13 international guests work with these children in performance. And it was incredible the change you saw in these deaf children and in their confidence and self-esteem. In South Africa, we do recognise that there are many different cultures and languages that are used throughout. However, some sign languages have never quite formed or been recognised. We have spoken to the national government about the support and the requirements that are needed for deaf individuals. And this is a way of being able to showcase the talents of young deaf performers and children. And that's why we established Sokigo, my organisation, to encourage young deaf performers to express themselves through the arts, and also in an attempt to advocate through local and national governments about the importance of supporting deaf performers and artists. So we have managed to form relationships with key allies in the performing arts sector, but it's taken us 4 years to negotiate back and forth with government and have organised many events along the way. As you can imagine, COVID has had a negative impact on many people in society worldwide. So we turned to using the internet to be able to broadcast for free deaf performers through our organisation. Although we are starved of funds, we were able to get the support that we needed to get the performers going and developing throughout COVID regardless. Over the last few years, we've held a number of events for young deaf people in South Africa. And many young deaf performers, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, are quite isolated. So since they've heard of our organisation, we've managed to increase our membership, and I do hope that we will expand into the future. And also with the work that we can do on Zoom, we're happy to work internationally with other organisations that are like-minded. And it is important to demonstrate support and the allyship that's needed in this space. And I really do hope that the work that we've created here with David from Clark Doyer means that we could potentially have a festival similar to what they have in France here in South Africa, and have global audiences abroad be interested in the work that we do here in South Africa. And clearly, we operate as a separate group, and we would be distinct in terms of the work that we provide, demonstrating the arts and culture in the South African space. But we do hope into the future that we can have global cooperation. And as we understand, COVID has had many negative effects. I experienced that myself. It's difficult when government refuses to provide funding or in-kind support. But the beauty is that the team I do work with are a bunch of wonderful volunteers who work very hard. And I do hope that we can turn things around and that people internationally would be interested in supporting the work that we do here in South Africa. And please do reach out and contact us if you are interested. We do have a website, Facebook page, and Instagram. And please reach out if you're interested in the work that we do here in South Africa. And now I'd like to show you a short clip of the work that we do at Sokigo. Thank you. Wonderful. That was certainly very inspiring, Asia, to see the growth and the development of all those young children, the work that you've done and created in South Africa. Thank you so much for that. Now we're going on to the third show, and we have a number of participants in this round. So we have Julia Murphy from Australia performing music song, and then we have Paeso Sorda, who is a clown from Argentina. So you'll get to see a little bit of humor. And then we have Susan Nayena from South Africa performing poetry. And then, of course, John Savage from the USA with visual video. Let's see the video. That was wonderful. Thank you, each and every one of you. Those performances were extraordinary. I applaud you all. Now, moving on, I'd like to introduce David de Kaiser from Cladoy, and he will also talk to us a little bit about Sindasur and the festival that we're all so familiar with and the work that you've done, David, over the last 20 years. And if you'd like to share your experiences with us, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Alice. It's so wonderful to see so many different deaf performers and artists. Hello to everybody who's watching. I must admit, many deaf people globally have not always had the opportunities to be able to partake in various deaf events, let alone celebrate deaf culture, the arts, in the way that we know how to through the international signing community, separate from hearing speakers. So this is really to give people the opportunity to be able to express themselves as an artist or debate various aspects through the work that we do. So if you think about a tea bag, and when you dunk the tea in the hot water, there are so many elements that ricochet from this. We're looking at deaf performers, we look at politics, human rights. When we come together, we see what permeates through, and that's significant in terms of sign language and how it has an impact on individuals and can transform an individual's life. So the significance is working in partnership, and I think historically that many of us worked in isolation. So as the communities have grown through the arts sector, people have become more inspired, wanting to work together in partnership and in allyship. And it is critical that deaf artists, or those who are deaf that enjoy politics and various other aspects of the community, those who use sign language, need to be able to come together in a deaf space and celebrate their own language and culture and give an appreciation and support to each and every one of us. And that will ensure that the future is secure for all deaf people and will maintain a positive balance and perspective. The pessimism of the past has gone, and I think we're at a crossroad where our dreams can come true and be realised. And it's important that deaf people internationally do come together and have critical conversations. And I truly believe that in the global context, events such as these are so important. And it is important that we work with many different organisations, performers, artists, working with deaf schools, deaf associations and organisations, EUD, WFD, and the various national associations that exist in each country around the world. And where we do experience barriers, it's important that we do create influence. And I feel as though we've seen a huge progression in the last number of years, and we're seeing this being sped up over time. Looking at the example from Aisha in South Africa, I really applaud the work that she's taken on board. The culture, what I experienced in that partnership was absolutely incredible. And unfortunately, they're not able to do that on their own. It's an example where we are able to work in partnership and support them, see the work that's happening in China, Brazil, and other parts of the world. And it is important that we have a more open society and create open-mindedness around deaf people and what they're able to do to ensure that they are able to be successful and lead truly beautiful lives. Thank you. Thank you, David. I do appreciate those kind words, and it is very important that we do have an influence globally. Now, I would like to ask the panelists a number of questions if we go to the Q&A session. So first of all, looking at Article 30 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, recognising the rights of deaf communities to their own cultural and linguistic identity. When we look at this, including deaf culture and sign language, how would you use this article to promote deaf culture and the arts? Who would like to respond? Any takers? Mindy? The UN Convention is significant. It's quite a powerful tool. And like Joe was saying earlier, it is significant. And we need to think about how we can utilise this more often. And the work that we do here in my country, in Sweden, ensures that having the UN Convention means that governments will support that. We do have various support groups in France, other nations, and we see hearing organisations being afforded these opportunities, but not so much deaf organisations, which is truly sad, and it's not a great state. So it is critical that we do have theatre or production companies that support deaf individuals in each nation, and therefore this means that we can see a global economy in terms of increasing the profile of deaf people and artists and that importance. Aisha? With the UN Convention, it is critical that deaf South Africans have hope, because we've lobbied to the government for a long time and we can utilise this tool, and it means this can empower us. Despite doing so, unfortunately, it means the government sometimes still does not take our word seriously. So we need to have positive dialogue and not necessarily rely on other countries. I understand that Europe and the United States has those supports. And whilst we could always transfer skills to different nations, it's important that we have something here locally. So we need to get the attention of local governments in our own countries to understand the importance of the UN Convention and perhaps maybe use it as a positive guide to be able to gain influence. David, looking back, if we think about the UN, the transformation that has occurred over time, and Joseph may be able to correct me, people truly believe that the UN Convention would create change. And that's not always the case. I mean, the people you're working with within the UN are a diverse range of people, and they have a different mindset. And what we're dealing with is different cultural aspects where some national governments don't adhere to the UN Convention, and especially if it costs money. So they will defer and postpone any financial support that they're considering. So it is a very difficult and tough road. And I do believe that slowly over time, positivity can only create this change, and perhaps national governments will listen to what's occurring in this space with the UN Convention. And as we know, the UN Convention was a very slow road to take. And this took a very long time for this to be established. And I think we'll see the same in the national countries that we're advocating for deaf people in, that this will just take time. Joseph? If I could add, the UN Convention and how it's interpreted also has an impact on the nation that we're looking at. So as an example, in African nations, deaf people, how can they produce art and culture? We understand that they have rich tribal roots and artworks that ideally they could sell. That might be specific to those individuals, but for other countries, it may be more significant around cultural events. So I think we need to ensure that this can be emulated across various continents, but understanding that each national country has their own way of representing art and performance. Wonderful, thank you. From Alice. The next question I wanted to ask was, in your opinion and perspective, how can deaf arts and performances contribute to safeguarding the human rights of deaf people? Any takers? Just to clarify for David, so I was asking what's your opinion and perspective on how deaf arts and performances can contribute to safeguarding the human rights of deaf people? How can that do that? Aisha? I'd like to talk a little bit about the experience in South Africa working with deaf children. There's many schools where education is provided, but individuals are not able to progress into tertiary education. So whilst we're working with deaf individuals who may have very limited language, performance in the arts opens doors for young people to gain employment, to earn an income, to improve their quality of life. So the arts, I believe, does assist young deaf people in South Africa. Whilst their educational opportunities may not be fantastic, this is another form of being able to increase the numbers of young deaf people to be successful and encourage them, and a way of them being able to earn an income. Politics aside, the various organisations need to advocate and focus on their key messages and focuses. But what we want to do is create self-esteem and confidence in young deaf people for them to be able to lead successful lives. And I think that performance in the arts certainly does assist in that way. From Alice, anybody else? Yes, Mindy? Yes, I totally agree, Aisha. I think the work that's done in the arts also looks at the emotional aspect, how to emotionally express oneself, which is critical. And it's also about having reflective insight, being able to negotiate with people, how to perform. So you're creating a reflective ability about the individual and their life and what they can achieve to be able to better have those conversations, reflect on their own insights, and that also psychologically supports deaf individuals and makes us all a stronger deaf community. So I believe that the arts does create more confidence in individuals in being able to self-advocate and stand up for themselves. Joseph. Yes, I think politics, if we think about that topic, is quite broad. So it means that people lobby government, and that is one process, but also the scope is quite broad. So here we're showcasing deaf individuals and how we feel and how we express ourselves through the arts. And that's a form of politics, if you like. So it can be political, demonstrating the arts to the mainstream. And when that happens online, it creates more of an awareness. And then politicians see that and they have a better understanding and they tweak their mindsets. So if you look into the past, it was very different. I mean, we did have sign language performances, and we are very familiar with the oralist approach and the Milan Conference where sign language was banned. So it is important that individuals are able to express themselves through arts and politics, and those topics do actually relate and interchange with one another. Mindy? Yes, I just wanted to add to that, thinking about the deaf community and so many diverse communities that exist, and being able to express an opinion. If we think about demonstrating opinion in the arts, we don't necessarily have costumes as such, but we're able to express our feelings, and that that's a critical component because deaf people historically have not always been able to do that. So it is very important that we can work closely with allies to support the work that we do in one's self-expression. Okay, any closing comments from anybody on the panel? No? Okay. Thank you so much for all those responses. And Joseph, I'll hand over to you for your closing remarks. I would like to say I would love to recognise and applaud everybody for this first International Week of Deaf People being celebrated in this webinar, showcasing deaf artists and performances. And all the videos we saw certainly demonstrate how many deaf people are working out there in various forms of art. And this links into our theme for the International Week of Deaf People when we're looking at thriving deaf communities. And the International Day of Sign Languages, we recognise with such significance because individuals are able to and have the right to express themselves through sign language. And again, we're showcasing culture and showcasing our human rights. I'd like to thank everybody, all the performers who submitted their videos, the moderators, and everybody who worked behind the scenes to ensure that we could celebrate our deaf world and the evolution of deaf artists. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.